Now, I don't want it to sound like I'm just trying to nitpick Paizo here. We are all truly grateful that the remaster upgraded the Turn Undead feat and made it a little bit stronger for clerics. That is a good thing. Panic the Dead is more useful, but I think reasonable minds can acknowledge that Paizo missed an opportunity to call the new feat Panic at the Graveyard. Today, I want to talk about my initial reactions to the Pathfinder Remaster and some of the, turbulent emotions that I've been feeling on today's episode of The Local Disaster Tour Guide. Hello travelers and tourists, my name is Mark and I'm the Local Disaster Tour Guide. That's right, I'm a storyteller that's ready to call out Paizo because Paizo, when you say more and the original number is 8, don't try to sell me 6. Welcome to a journey through the fantastic world of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Starfinder, and welcome to a video on my initial reactions to the Pathfinder Remaster. I am one of many content creators who was given early access to the Pathfinder Remaster documents for the Player Core and Game Master Core books, and I have been working my way through those books. My PDFs didn't come through until after the embargo lifted, so I've been a little bit behind on researching and studying the new material, but I have been making my way through those products, and I do look forward to covering this content in the weeks and months ahead. Paizo is doing a lot of interesting things, and there is a lot of excitement, certainly warranted excitement, in and around the Pathfinder community about the Pathfinder 2e Remaster. There are videos going out left and right about all of the new and exciting things and all of the changes that Paizo has made, and there's just a lot of positive conversation that's been happening around the Remaster. And in today's video, well, I'm going to admit that I'm struggling to find the right tone for this video, because if I'm being completely transparent, my personal experience and reaction to the remaster has not been as just forward-facing positive as many other people out there have been presenting. Don't get me wrong, there is a lot of good stuff about the remaster, but at least for me personally, as I've been reading through the PDFs and kind of taking note of the things that I want to talk about and want to discuss, my personal experience has been much more reserved, and it's kind of put me in a weird place when it comes to covering remaster content. So in today's video, I kind of want to talk about that experience and why I think I've had a more reserved reaction to it than maybe some of the other content creators out there. Because if I'm being honest, I suspect that there are many people who are probably in a similar boat to me. I hope as I go through this video that you hear that I'm not trying to be hypercritical of Paizo. If anything, my respect for Paizo just continues to grow, and at the end of this video, I'm actually going to offer 3 reasons why I am still very optimistic about the remaster, even if my initial reactions have been very reserved. There are some things that are certainly hanging me up, but there are also some things that I think are very positive that give me some real hope for where Pathfinder 2e is going. So I do hope that I managed to strike an even tone with this video, because Pathfinder 2e is still a game that I love, and I really don't want to lose sight of that. In fact, in this entire video, there's really only going to be one point where I just feel like Paizo made what is clear-cut a mistake, and I kind of have some problems with what they did. And even on that single point, there is still plenty of possibility for that to get a lot better in the future. Most of the things that are holding me back right now are things that I do realize there is plenty of room for this game to grow and develop and mature, and for Paizo to do some really amazing things. And if I'm being honest, I think Paizo is aiming for some really amazing things. I'm just not sure if they're there yet. So in this video, I'm going to offer 5 reasons that I'm currently struggling with the remaster, and then I'm going to follow it up with 3 reasons that I remain optimistic for where Pathfinder 2e is going, and I invite you to be part of that conversation. Let me know how you are reacting to the news around the remaster. Let me know what concerns you have and also what bright points you see. Now, I did give a nod to this earlier, but Paizo did send me some free PDF copies of the Player Core and Game Master Core. I am still working my way through those books, and I don't want to offer a full review of those books just yet because honestly I haven't finished them. I want to make sure that my content is up to my quality standards, so I am hoping to actually have the review of the Game Master Core and Player Core probably sometime in early December. Right now, I've been working through the Game Master Core a little bit faster, so that actually may end up coming out first. And as for some of the coverage around things like new classes and new spells, starting in January, you're going to see some of my old series on this channel being revitalized. My Classic Introduction series is going to be returning with the Classics Remastered series, where I'm going to be revisiting some of the classes I've previously covered, but looking at them through the lens of the remaster. So expect that to start sometime in January. And because it's a big part of the remaster, you can expect both some long-form and short-form Spellslinger Academy content to be returning as well. And then, in terms of content looking forward, there's one series that I put on hold several months back that I honestly have been aching to return to, and that is my Storytelling in Pathfinder 2e series. When I heard that a new GM core was going to be released, I felt it was in the best interest of that series to wait for the new Game Master core to be presented. So my Storytelling Remastered series will also hopefully be kicking back up again sometime in January. The in-depth content around the Pathfinder Remaster is coming, and I do want to give a genuine thanks to Paizo for giving me early access so that I could go ahead and start researching these videos and really taking a look at all of the stuff that Paizo is doing. There is a lot of great content here. One last thing before we get going. As always, don't forget to do the YouTube stuff. You can always like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel. Those things do help to feed the algorithm. And you can join the Disaster Tour Guide community by checking out my free Discord or my Patreon. Both of those will be linked in the video description. But as always, the most important thing you can do to support this channel is to jump down to the comments section and be a part of the conversation. The best thing about doing this channel is getting to be a part of these conversations and talk to fellow nerds from all over the world. I absolutely love that. And this video is a little bit of a risky video for me because I know I'm taking my first video on the remaster in a bit of a strange direction. But if this is content that you find engaging or interesting, jump down to the comments section, give me your thoughts, give me your ideas. It really does encourage me as a creator, and it helps feed the conversations to come. But with all that out of the way, let's get started. Okay, so let's dive into several of the reasons that I think I've been reserved, that I've been struggling with the Pathfinder 2e remaster. And the first one is very simple, which is change is stressful. Pathfinder 2e, my favorite game, is changing. And even the most beneficial version of change can still be a very stressful event. I'm one of those individuals who lost their career at the start of the pandemic. I was working in one job that I really loved and thought, oh, this is something I could do for the rest of my life. And then the pandemic hit, and now, 4 years later, I've had to completely reimagine where I was going to be and what kind of work I was going to be doing. Now, I landed in a new career that was very, very similar to the one that I left. I'm using a lot of the same skills and I have a lot of the same connections to the community I prefer to work with. I landed in a really good place, but that transition from the old career to the new career, I think everyone watching would understand when I say it was stressful. It was very difficult to deal with. And I think that's a very apt comparison to what we have with Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Pathfinder 2e has gone through what is a very, very significant change, and it's worth noting that that change has happened in an incredibly short period of time. If you were to go back and watch my videos from just 1 year ago, you would not hear anything about a remaster. In fact, back then, you wouldn't even have heard anything about an open RPG creative license or any of the other major news that shook up the TTRPG industry since January of this year. It has been a crazy year, and all kinds of things have changed very, very quickly. And even if logically I can look and say that Pathfinder 2e from a year ago and the Pathfinder 2e remaster that is starting to come out now, we're landing in a very similar place. The reality is there's been a lot of change, a lot of stress, a lot of unknowns, and I would not blame anyone that's kind of in this hobby or in this sphere for having some emotional hang-ups just from the sheer magnitude of changes that we have been through. If you had told me just a year ago that Paizo was getting ready to completely rewrite their core 4 books and completely represent that material in a new format, I would have told you were crazy, and even if you had persuaded me that it was coming, I wouldn't have believed that Paizo could do it. The amount of change that we've had to deal with as a community has truly been astronomical, and this leads to the second point that I want to make, which is the change that we've experienced is ongoing, and we don't know when it's going to stop. Paizo announced that they were essentially going to remaster the core 4 books that make up the heart of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. The core rulebook, the Game Mastery Guide, Bestiary 1, and the Advanced Player's Guide, those were going to be redone, and we were going to get Player Core 1, Player Core 2, Game Master Core, and Monster Core. Right around the time that this video goes live, Player Core 1 and Game Master Core will be available to the public, and this is the first big step in the remaster becoming live and becoming part of the public play experience. But with the announcement that we just discussed, there are at least 2 more books that we know for sure are coming. We're still waiting to see the Monster Core. We're still waiting to see Player Core 2 and what Paizo's going to do with some of our other favorite classes like Barbarian and Sorcerer. There's a joke in there somewhere about me and the Investigator class, but we'll save that for a future video. The incredible changes that we've been experiencing are just really beginning, and we know that there's more to come, and if we're being honest, we don't know how far those changes are going to need to go. Paizo has understandably been focused on these 4 core products, and they haven't really looked beyond them in terms of the scope of what Pathfinder 2e is, but there is a lingering question of whether or not other aspects of Pathfinder 2e will need to be revisited and remastered in the future. A lot of people, myself included, suspect that Bestiary 2 and 3 will ultimately receive a remaster as well, and there are lingering questions about whether or not other books that Paizo has published could also get a remaster treatment down the road. Now, none of this is to say that the remaster process, that these changes are necessarily a bad thing. If we're being honest, there's probably more than a few people in the Pathfinder 2e community who would like to see a remaster of Secrets of Magic, as there is a vocal part of the community that feels it hasn't been well supported since that book was originally released. The idea that other products might need to be remastered down the road is not inherently a bad thing, but it does leave this open-ended kind of hanging question of how serious and far-reaching are these changes going to be. We are just getting our first look at the new environment, and there are still a ton of unknowns. Now, I hope it should be clear from the first 2 points that I've made in this video that a lot of the emotional issues I've been having with the remaster, I'm not necessarily pinning on Paizo. They didn't create the OGL scandal, they responded to the OGL scandal, and the situation that Paizo is experiencing as a company, they have probably gone through much greater emotional turmoil than I have. I guarantee you my gaming table is not nearly as stressful as some of the meetings that have happened around their tables, as they've tried to do the best that they can to respond to the crazy events of the past year. It has been a roller coaster to be a fan of this hobby, watching all of the crazy stuff that's coming to pass. But I am fully aware that it must be even crazier for people inside the industry who are trying to stay afloat in the middle of all of the stuff that's been going on. This all brings me to the third point that I want to make, and I want to be clear that I'm not criticizing Paizo on this, but this is something that becomes apparent as you read through the remaster. A lot of the changes that you see in the remaster exist for one very important reason, and that is Paizo has to protect themselves legally. Now, again, let me state very clearly, I'm not criticizing Paizo. Paizo should protect their work, Paizo should protect their company, Paizo should protect the incredible game that they have designed. I do not fault them in the slightest for having that as a principal goal in what they're doing. But when you look at the Pathfinder Remaster, there's a lot of stuff that has changed, not because it needed to change, but because Paizo is just trying to protect themselves. And to give you a very simple example here, Magic Missile versus Force Barrage. There's nothing inherently better about the new name, but the new name is in place for one very obvious reason: Paizo is protecting themselves. Now, that's not a strictly negative truth about this whole scenario, but a lot of the changes that we are coping with as players are not happening because it's necessary for the health or the betterment of the game. They're happening because it's necessary for the protection of Paizo as a company. And while I fully understand Paizo needing to do that, it also just kind of hurts to have to acknowledge that changes are happening for that reason. We find ourselves in a familiar space with a familiar game, dealing with a lot of familiar mechanics, and playing a lot of familiar adventures, and yet there are numerous elements around us that have been changed for what primarily amounts to legal reasons. And no matter how you slice it, that just kind of stinks. All of this leads to the fourth point I want to make, and on these last 2 points I want to tread carefully because there is some potential criticism of Paizo here, but I don't want to push that criticism too far. Point number 4 is some of the changes that we're seeing to Pathfinder 2nd Edition are unimpactful, and some of the changes that we're seeing are, I don't have a better word to say it, negative. The unimpactful changes are relatively easy to highlight. Things like changing the name of Magic Missile to Force Barrage that I mentioned a moment ago. Is it necessarily the end of the world that I have to learn to replace flat-footed with off-guard at my gaming table? No, not really. But also the changes didn't really change much. It's just new terminology, which is not the most exciting thing to have. But then when you look at some of the changes that are happening, honestly, it feels like the game has, at least for the moment, that's an important distinction, at least for the moment, the game has taken a step back. I'll probably get some pushback on this in the comments section, and if you disagree with me, that is perfectly okay. I'm going to be honest, the new sanctification system in the 2E Remaster is not as good as the alignment system in the original version of Pathfinder 2E. I'm sorry, that's just the way I feel. I'm not saying I don't like the sanctification system. It's functional, it does what it needs to do. I'm also not saying that I don't understand why Paizo made the change. I totally understand why they needed to make the change. I will even add a further clarification that the sanctification system as it exists now may not be the best, but I do think there is at least some potential in the system that as the 2E Remaster goes on, Paizo might be able to do some very interesting things with it, so I am still holding out some hope. But when you take the Divine Sanctification system and the alignment system and just compare them side by side, you will quickly realize the alignment system did more. First off, the Divine Sanctification system, at least as it currently exists, applies only to clerics, and even then only to some clerics. Now going forward, we're probably going to see it expand to classes like the champion. I believe there was an exemplar feat in the exemplar playtest that could let them be sanctified as well. I do think we will see other classes that fall under the potential for sanctification as the 2E remaster goes forward. But the old alignment system applied to everyone. Every character, every class had an alignment. The moral and ethical center of every character in the game had maybe a small but present impact mechanically on that character inside of Pathfinder 2E. Divine Sanctification plays a similar role to alignment, but the relative slice of characters that care about Divine Sanctification is incredibly small compared to what alignment used to do. And that says nothing about the fact that Divine Sanctification only concerns itself with the difference between holy and unholy, and it completely disregards one of the old elements of alignment, which was law versus chaos. You have a much more narrow band of topics that address a much more narrow selection of characters, and it just feels like one of the mechanical aspects of play has been cut off from a lot of characters inside of the game. Now, I do realize that there is some pushback that might come here. One of the things that people might mention is that edicts and anathema fill the role that alignment used to play in Pathfinder 2E, and I disagree with that statement for a reason. And that is, edicts and anathema already existed in Pathfinder 2E and functioned perfectly well inside of alignment. Edicts and anathema are not part of Divine Sanctification. They play alongside Divine Sanctification, they can inform it, and they can make some of the questions of that mechanical aspect of the game more interesting, don't get me wrong, but edicts and anathema are their own system that are not necessarily part of sanctification or alignment either way. I do appreciate the fact that Paizo is pushing edicts and anathema more and really expanding that part of the game. It was a good addition to the game, and I'm glad they're doing more with it. But edicts and anathema are not specific to Divine Sanctification, and so I don't really consider that to be part of this particular discussion. Another thing that someone might push back with is a notable positive change that has come with the shift to Divine Sanctification. In removing alignment from the game, they removed alignment damage from the game, so law damage, good damage, chaos damage, evil damage, that kind of thing. They removed those types of damage and they replaced it with a new spirit damage type. And this could be its own video. I actually think spirit damage is wonderful and a fantastic addition to the game. I really think Paizo did a good job using spirit damage to replace the previous alignment damages that existed in the game. Spirit damage is very much a good thing and a boon to the game overall, but kind of like edicts and anathema, I don't consider it to be strictly a part of the Divine Sanctification system that Paizo has added. Much like edicts and anathema function perfectly well inside of the old alignment system, the reality is, as a GM, it would not be hard for me to go back to the old version of Pathfinder 2E and insert spirit damage into that version of the game, and for it to play perfectly well inside of the old alignment system. Spirit damage plays really well alongside Divine Sanctification, but it's not necessarily strictly a part of Divine Sanctification, and you could easily see it existing in other versions of the game perfectly normally. The final version of pushback that I might get on this point, and honestly the main version of pushback that I expect to get, are the numerous completely fair criticisms of the old alignment system. Alignment was not perfect. I may feel like Divine Sanctification is missing something mechanically, but that doesn't mean that alignment was perfect and was free from any criticisms. I'm aware of the many ongoing conversations and debates that happened about alignment, and I realize why a lot of people are perfectly happy to wash their hands of that system. I get that. For me personally, I do like the alignment system, but I also like alignment for what it is, and I do recognize that it's a system that has some limits and has some issues that you need to be prepared for if you're going to play with that. For me, the same is also true of Divine Sanctification. It's a good enough system, and it has some positive attributes, but I also feel like it has some limits that you need to be aware of if you're going to use it. At the end of the day, I understand why Paizo made the change that they did, and I can see the benefits of the change that they made. In fact, they actually kind of teased some ideas that in the long run, Divine Sanctification could really open up some unique and interesting mechanical options in Pathfinder 2e. There is some creative space here, and I'm hoping to see Paizo explore that as we go forward, but at least in the moment, if I compare Divine Sanctification and Alignment side by side and their role inside the game, the reality is Alignment is just the stronger system, and Divine Sanctification really needs to grow if it wants to compete. All of this leads to the final point that has caused me some hesitation when it comes to the Pathfinder 2e Remaster, and that is, at the end of the day, we have to acknowledge we're losing some content. Much like previous points I've made, most of the blame here I do not rest at the feet of Paizo. They have been responding to a circumstance far bigger than them, far beyond anything they ever planned, and I realize they didn't create this scenario, they're just responding to it, but there is a lot of content that is going away because it has to. And yes, that content may be out there on Archives of Nethys, but the reality is we know going forward that content's not going to be supported. We are getting a new version of Pathfinder 2e, and the new books, the new materials, the new things that Paizo does are going to be to support the Pathfinder 2e Remaster content. The reality is we're going to lose content, and as an extension of that thought, some of the content that we're losing is really good content. A lot of these things that are throwbacks to the history of tabletop RPGs, the reason they've stood the test of time is because there was a lot of positive ideas that existed before Pathfinder 2e was a thing. Pathfinder drew from a well of incredible inspiration that was a lot of fantastic games that came before it, and losing access to some of those things, even if I understand why Paizo had to make the changes it did, the reality is it just hurts. Yes, the legacy content is there and you can revisit it if you want to, but Paizo, understandably, has to push their game and their content in a new direction, and that legacy content is going to be left behind, and it just hurts to admit that that's a reality. And this is the point where I do have to nitpick Paizo just a little bit, because in their messaging, they've tried to play down that we are losing content. Now, I understand from a publishing perspective why they have approached the remaster the way they have, and I'm not saying that Paizo is trying to be deceptive here. But there's an element of the conversation that I feel Paizo has downplayed, when in reality everyone involved knows, hey, this is a serious issue, and it's just a hit we're going to have to take. Let me give you a practical example. In the original publication of Pathfinder 2e, Wizards had 8 schools of magic that were drawn from some of the historical ideas that Pathfinder inherited from earlier games. Abjuration, Conjuration, Divination, those particular schools. In discussing the new version of the Wizard, Paizo is going for a new version of Wizard schools where your wizard went to an actual school and they studied a specific curriculum that influences the kind of magic that they can use. Now, there's already been a little bit of back and forth in regards to wizard curriculums, just because wizard curriculums are not as expansive as the old schools of magic would have been. If you had something like enchantment or evocation under the old version of Pathfinder 2e, there were more options there than there would be in something like the study of civic wizardry. It was a niche argument to be sure, but there were some people who felt, understandably so, like they were losing something in losing access to the old schools of magic, but Paizo came in and they really tried to sell the new wizard schools the following way. Now that we aren't tied to the old version of wizard schools, we can have as many schools as we want. In the old version of the game, there were 8 schools, specifically 8 schools, and you can throw in a universalist school if you want to, but essentially the wizard is tied to these 8 specific iterations of magic, and there are no other options available. But now, with the Pathfinder 2e Remaster, you have curriculums that can be anything we can dream up. We can have more schools than just 8. We can come up with as many ideas as we want. And the Pathfinder Remaster has 6 schools. Well, technically 7, but one of them is the new variant on the Universalist Wizard. And Paizo, I kind of hate to say it, if you're selling me on more than 8, you need to print at least 8 or I'm gonna notice. Now, going forward, Paizo can totally develop more schools than just the 6 that they put in Player Core 1. I've actually seen some rumors that they're looking at redeveloping the Rune Lord schools of magic into things like a School of Greed and a School of Gluttony. So there is certainly the play space for more schools, but it was a real letdown when I opened the Player Core PDF, went to Wizard first thing, and saw less schools when I was promised more. But now I want to do something very specific in this video, because there is a trap that I could fall into right here that would be easy to do. It would be really easy to be stuck on the things that are holding me up. Change is stressful. Paizo is trying to protect themselves legally. Some of the changes aren't really measuring up to what I want them to be. We're losing some content. I could dig into all of the different things that are happening in the Pathfinder 2e Remaster and go point by point by point by point and mention every single thing that stresses me out. But I want to stop that particular aspect of this conversation and take a step back, because there is a big picture here that I think is worth seeing. And as I've gone through the process of reviewing the Pathfinder 2e Remaster, the Player Core, and the Game Master Core, I've read about a third of each of those books so far. I am, more and more, finding myself excited and interested and coming up with new ideas and looking forward to where Paizo is going and what Paizo is doing. There is a positive picture emerging. So yes, there are things that are stressful, but there is also a lot of good stuff going on, and I think those things are worth discussing. So even if there are some things that have been hard for me to cope with, I also think that there are some fantastic things that are worth mentioning. I want to take a moment and discuss Paizo, because you may have noticed in this video, while there have been a lot of things I'm stressed about, I've been very reluctant to criticize Paizo directly on a lot of things, and part of that comes down to I have been consistently impressed by Paizo's response to everything in the last year. The first and biggest reason that I am optimistic about where the Pathfinder 2e Remaster is going to go is because Paizo has done something legendary. I have been gaming for over 2 decades of my life. I have followed this industry, at least in part, for a significant chunk of my life, and I have seen many games, I've seen many companies, and Paizo has done something I don't think I've ever seen in the TTRPG industry. Depending on when this video actually goes live, Paizo is releasing over 800 pages of remastered content for their game that, if you go back 10 months, wasn't even on their radar. I cannot undersell how Herculean of a task Paizo has performed in responding to the OGL crisis and responding to all of those emergencies. Paizo has taken 800 pages of content, thoroughly reviewed, thoroughly vetted, and reworked it to preserve the life and integrity of their game. And they've done that in, I don't know the exact timeline, but I'm pretty sure less than 10 months. That is astounding to me. I have not seen a company react on such an incredible scale and so effectively in so narrow of a window of time. Paizo has truly moved mountains in terms of protecting their product and protecting their game, and hats off to Paizo. I'm impressed. And part of the reason I'm impressed is Paizo hasn't just accomplished a legendary overhaul of 800 pages of content in 10 months. Paizo has also accomplished a legendary overhaul of the tabletop RPG industry in 10 months. A year ago, things rested comfortably on the back of the Open Gaming license, and then Wizards of the Coast stepped in and tried to shatter that comfortable foundation. Paizo stepped in and worked with a multitude of other companies to create the Open RPG Creative License as an alternative foundation for gaming companies to build on, and they did it in such a way that the Open RPG Creative License is not necessarily going to be bringing money in for them. They were just creating an alternate space that they and other members of the industry could work without having their world shaken up by something like the OGL. Now, will the Open RPG Creative License ever be as big as the license that Wizards of the Coast uses? Probably not, I don't know for sure. But just the idea that Paizo has successfully carved this space out for themselves and others in the gaming sphere, that is incredible. But then they didn't just carve that space out, they also took large chunks of their content and quickly and effectively translated that content over so that that content would be safe and available for us as a gaming community to use. Paizo has accomplished something I have never seen before, and they have my respect. As I said much earlier in this video, a year ago, if you told me something like this was coming, I wouldn't have believed you, and even if you persuaded me that something might go wrong and it might be necessary, I wouldn't have been convinced that there was a company that could do it. Paizo has, and Paizo has proven that they have a serious stake in this market, and they are a player that I think a lot of people have underestimated in the past. I don't think other companies can afford to underestimate Paizo going forward. They have shown some serious chops, and they have done something truly impressive. This leads to the second reason that I am optimistic. Everything I just described was not done by a company that was struggling to survive. The OGL crisis that erupted at the beginning of this year easily could have sunk many companies or put many companies in desperate straits, but in my position as a content creator, I may not be deep in Paizo circles by any stretch of the imagination, but even in the limited access I have, in watching Paizo's response, I have seen a company that has had a lot of strength, that has had a lot of clarity, that has had a lot of purpose, and they are not in survival mode. Paizo is looking forward and saying, if you're going to make us go our own way, well, we're going to carve our own territory, and we're going to make what we want to make. You can tell that Paizo is moving boldly and aggressively, and they're not just reacting to what's happening around them, but they are acting on the environment around them, and that is a point that should not be undersold. A lot of people who are covering remastered content are covering some of the exciting and fun changes that Paizo has created for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and Paizo even acknowledged that yes, they needed to go back and remaster content, but they said, hey, this is a chance to, in their own words, open up the patient and really take a look at things that aren't quite working the way we want to. Paizo encountered what could have been a monumental challenge, but they saw it as a monumental opportunity to go in and rework their game. Do I agree with every decision they've made, and will I agree with every decision they make going forward? No. But that mentality that this is not a challenge but an opportunity is the mentality of a company that is in a very strong place and that is prepared to make their claim on the market going forward, and it's very, very impressive to see. Even a casual observer of Paizo can tell that their creative juices have continued to flow in the middle of all of this mess, and they have been actively looking for places and opportunities to really expand their game and make their game more interesting and engaging and exciting. And all of this dovetails nicely into the last point I want to make in this video, which is Paizo very clearly has some creative ideas still in store. Paizo isn't just trying to survive this storm, they're trying to build something amazing in this situation, and they want to make their game better than it's ever been before. And while a lot of their work has been about carving out the ORC and a safe creative space for themselves and other creators, or reworking their content so that it's legally protected and safe and they don't have to worry about future legal threats, while Paizo has been dealing with all of this particular nitpicky survival kind of stuff, Paizo is also throwing out a lot of creative and fun ideas that really have me excited for the future of this game. A simple example of this is the fact that versatile heritages are now considered to be a core part of the 2E experience, where ideas in the past like the half-elf and half-orc were limited to offshoots of the human ancestry. Now that concept has been opened up so that it's so much broader and so that it creates so many more opportunities. Paizo may have had to rework some things, but in reworking some things, they have clearly created a lot of creative space that they, and as a result we, get to play in. Just the fact that they actually give us a couple of paragraphs on how to create our own half-ancestries, such as half-dwarves, speaks to the fact that Paizo is really looking for ways to grow and expand what their game can be and should be going forward, and the fact that Paizo clearly has a lot of creative ideas ahead of them is something that has me genuinely excited. I don't want to go too far down this rabbit trail, but to give an additional point to this very concept, the War of the Immortals that's happening next year is just another example of Paizo really saying, what can we do with the space we have? And I'm excited to see what they have coming. But the time has come for me to turn the conversation over to you. What are your initial reactions to the Pathfinder 2e Remaster, and would you say that your initial reactions are similar to mine? Have you been really excited, happy to dive into everything that Paizo has to offer, or like me, did you struggle and hesitate and have some trouble when you were first digging in? And if you had some trouble like I did, has your experience been similar in that the more you've dug in, the more you've started to become excited about where Paizo is going? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this subject. I know this video hasn't dug a lot into the specifics of the remaster and the changes that Paizo has made. As I've mentioned, I've got some plans going forward where I'm really going to be diving deep into a lot of the content that Paizo is producing. So don't worry, we will get to that stuff. But in this video, I really wanted to take the time to do a big picture look at what's been going on and my response to what's been happening, because I do think it makes for an interesting conversation, and I suspect that there are probably a few other people out there who have found themselves in a situation similar to me. This has certainly been a crazy year, and there are definitely some things that have been hard for me to deal with, but at the same time, I'm definitely hopeful because I think there are a lot of great things coming, and I can't wait to see what Paizo is going to be doing going forward. So please jump down to the comments section, let me know your thoughts and ideas, and whether you agree or disagree with me. And if you're so inclined, remember to do all of that other YouTube stuff as well. Like, share, subscribe, check out my free Discord or Patreon. Those links will be in the video description. But as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation. Have a wonderful day.